and welcome to another episode of Experts Speak. I'm Michael DeLon. Today, I am talking with Ken Sanginario. And Ken, well, thanks for being my guest today, man.
It's my pleasure, Mike. I'm glad to be here.
Well, it's going to be a great conversation. So Ken runs a company called Corporate Value. He spent years and years in corporations helping companies build the value, enhance the value of your company. And man, Ken, I'm actually intrigued to talk with you about this because I don't think this is a topic a lot of small to mid-sized businesses really think about or understand. So I can't wait to just dive in a little bit. And as we do that, let me ask you, how in the world did you get doing what you're doing today?
Yeah. In 1992, I'm going back a ways now, I got recruited to be the CFO of a public company.
Okay.
And it was very much like a public private equity firm in that they had a portfolio of disparate operating companies. They had raised a lot of private capital. They had raised a lot of debt, public debt capital as well. So the debt side is what made them be a public company. And I was recruited in to help them continue to grow the portfolio and so forth. I had to sign the first time I had to like personally sign the SEC, quarterly and annual reports, which was way before Sarbanes-Oxley, but nonetheless, I took it very seriously. And within 3 or 4 months of joining that company, I realized that they were in deep financial distress for a variety of reasons, but they had a portfolio of operating companies, all disparate operating companies. And most of them, except for one, were all distressed. So that launched me into a 3-year-long turnaround and workout, one of the most grueling but most valuable experiences of my life. I initially thought, well, this is not what was sort of represented to me. I should just turn for the hills and run. But I thought, oh, well, maybe I can learn something here. This will probably take a year or so. Well, it turned into 3 years, very grueling, very intensive, many nights where I actually slept on my desk.
Wow.
And for 2 or 3 hours and continued on the next day. Same clothes, same everything. That's what it was like to work through. It was in that much distress. Well, that in those 3 years, I learned the art of turnarounds and workouts. I learned the hard way. I had a couple of great mentors from the outside that were kind of running the process, but I was kind of the point person on a lot of the effort. So I learned a ton. I then got that I got that in my blood. And I then, once that was all wrapped up and cleaned up and it was all successful, I intentionally then I joined a company that I got recruited to join, a private equity backed multi-unit entertainment and restaurant company. And that was a 5-year-long sort of turnaround, repositioning, regrowth. So I really had it in my blood at that point. So we raised a lot of capital there to turn the company around and then do a rollout. So that was 8 years basically of working from the inside out with really deeply distressed companies. And both turned out to be successful endeavors. And then I thought, I really like this. And in that second role, I got to raise my first, private equity rounds and that kind of stuff. So I then formed a turnaround firm with a couple partners. And then for the next 10 years, I had a turnaround consulting practice and got very involved in M&A and business valuations as well. So those became sort of my 3 areas of expertise, and they all fit together really powerfully, where the knowledge base of turnarounds and workouts, along with the knowledge base of M&A and business valuations, they leverage each other. And so I spent 10 years doing that kind of work, literally taking over companies at the behest of private equity firms or bank workout groups, or sometimes the business owners themselves, develop and execute a turnaround strategy over a 6 to 18-month period, and then either sell or recap the company on the back end. Absolutely loved the work. It was just so fulfilling being able to help companies really understand from deep inside the company where their constraints and weaknesses were, where their fail points were, where their root problems were, which I ended up having to be able to identify literally within a couple of days of being on the ground in a company. They might have been in distress for a year, 2 years, 3 years, but by the time I would get called in, it was, crisis or borderline crisis. Hey, we can't make payroll next week.
Wow.
Is this company salvageable? I'd have to get on the ground and literally within a couple days be able to figure out where the root problems were and if they could be fixed and how long it would take and how much it would cost and what would be involved, and then have the investors or bank make a decision about where to go. Do we go forward? Do we fix this or not? So I did that for 10 years. Absolutely loved it. Very fulfilling. Saved a lot of jobs, saved a lot of people's careers, saved a bunch of companies. The travel ultimately got to me because it was basically 100% travel. And so, that's a lot of time away from family and away from home and so forth. So I decided, it actually occurred to me that the same skill set that is used to fix a company that is in crisis also works for healthy or relatively healthy companies to make them healthier. It's all the same fundamentals. It's all the same inner workings. It's all the same qualitative attributes throughout the infrastructure of the company that helps companies either grow or starts to cause them to slip down the slippery slope into ultimate distress. So I decided to reposition my practice at that point to use all of that knowledge and all of those skill sets to helping relatively healthy companies reach their peak performance. And in that process, realized that most private companies could double or triple in value over a 3 to 5 year period without even growing their revenue or profitability, purely by de-risking the business, by building a higher quality business, more able to support future growth. And if they approach it the right way with discipline and focus, they can double the value certainly in 2 to 3 years without any revenue or profitability growth. And then the triple comes because the natural byproduct of having a really high quality, healthy company, the natural byproduct is expansion of revenue, expansion of profitability, cash flows, and the creation of value. Most business owners make the big mistake of thinking that revenue growth and profitability growth are drivers unto themselves. And they end up chasing those two factors, and they don't realize that those are not drivers. They are outputs. They're not inputs. They're outputs. They're the outputs of doing everything right throughout the organization. And that's typically a big paradigm shift for business owners to learn. I'm giving you a long-winded answer to how I got involved in this, but that's how I got involved. And that's what I've been dedicating my life, the rest of my career towards since 2010. So the last 15 years now, focusing exclusively on helping private companies to double or triple in value in 3 to 5 years.
That's amazing. I love, there's so much, Ken, we can talk about. Okay. So let's go down to the bottom line question that I'm asking, that my audience is asking.
Sure.
What difference does it make? Why do I want to increase the value of my private company? What's the end game there?
Yeah. Well, so most companies, great question. Most companies focus on revenue growth and profitability growth, but they don't realize that if they grow revenue the wrong way, if they treat revenue as a driver unto itself, they may be growing revenue that is actually eroding the value of their company. Bigger is not always better. In fact, very often it makes the company less valuable, because every time they grow revenue, they're adding new risk to the business, execution risk, financial risk, market risk, all sorts of different risks that are increasing as revenue increases. If they don't have the really robust infrastructure in place and fully functioning to support that growth, then the additional risk that they're adding to the business will eventually cause the weaker points in the company some of them to become fail points. And that's how companies start to slip into distress. Many of the companies that I had as turnaround clients were in that exact position. When I would ask them what they were doing in the 2 or 3 years before they started slipping into distress, very often the answer was, we were growing double digits year over year for the last 4 or 5 years. Well, they basically imploded under the weight of their own success. So they grew and grew, kept adding more stress, more pressure, more risk to the weakest areas of the company until those weak areas started to become fail points. The same thing happens when they chase profitability. They think, oh, I tried to sell, I couldn't get the price I wanted. I need to be more profitable. I'm going to start chopping and slashing costs that maybe aren't customer facing, because nobody will really know the difference in a year or two. I'll do that. We'll increase our EBITDA or our cash flow by 50 or 100%. We'll go back to the market. We'll have a bigger multiple. We'll have a bigger base. We'll have double the value, double or triple the value that I was being offered. It doesn't work like that, because they treat chopping and slashing costs the same way that they would think about capturing operating efficiencies. There's a big difference. Operating efficiencies happen naturally when all of the qualitative attributes of a company are in place and fully functioning. If they try to treat profitability as a direct driver, then they're chopping and slashing costs that they believe maybe aren't customer facing. It takes about 2 minutes for an investor or an acquirer to figure out what they've been doing the last couple of years. And at that point, they lose credibility. Now, mind you, by chopping and slashing costs, they are also eroding the future profitability, the future health of the business. And a buyer is not buying what the company did in the past. They're buying what the company will do in the future. The past is only used as a proxy for what the future might look like. So if they mortgage the future basically for the present by chopping and slashing costs to get EBITDA today, they are basically eroding the value of the company, because they are eroding the future of the company. Investors and acquirers can spot that in, literally within probably an hour of looking at a trend analysis, and then they walk away from the deal. So why focus on value? Because value is what somebody is buying or what somebody is investing in. If companies ever aspire to raising capital or selling the business or transferring ownership to another generation even, they want to run a company at peak performance that will create highest value. And if they do it the right way, the value that they create will be consistent, indisputable, and they'll be able to monetize it when the right time comes along.
That's great. I love that. I read a book. My son, who's my chief operating officer, gave it to me, and it's called Small Giants.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Love that book.
Yeah.
Because it just really said, the whole bigger is not always better. And we would rather be small, super efficient, serve our team, our community, our clients, and all that. And that book can really resonated with me and Caleb.
Yeah. Same with me. Bo Burlingham, I think, right?
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great book. Go read it. Small Giants. One thing that I sense here, Ken, that when you come in, you're like, don't take this one. You're like a superhero with X-ray vision because of your experience, your background, the way God's made you, that you can drop into a company and use your X-ray vision to kind of spot what the business owner probably is not seeing, so that you can help make those fixes, and that intel will enhance the value of the company. Is that right?
No, that's absolutely right. And it's not that I'm a superhero; it's that I have fresh eyes, and I have the experience to know, based on the owner's background. In other words, do they come from operations? Do they come from sales? Do they come from finance or what is their background? If I know that, and I know the industry that they're in, I can pretty much guess where the root problems of the company are going to reside, and then I can sort of zero right in on them very quickly. And what I find is that most companies are strongest naturally in the areas of the company that reflect the background of the owner.
So if they come from operations, they'll be strongest in operations. They'll be strongest in maybe some of the other areas that are kind of related to operations, like they may be strong in finance, the finance area, or in the legal area, or both. But they might be weak in some of the natural opposite personality areas. If they're strong in operations, they might be weak in leadership or marketing or sales or something like that. So and those represent their blind spots. And it's human nature that we focus on the areas that we're strongest, because that's our comfort zone. That's where we excel. That's where we feel like we're making the biggest impact. It's also human nature to sort of shy away from the areas where we're weakest, because it's a struggle and people don't like to struggle, right?
Right.
So the weakest areas also become the blind spots of the company. And after so many years of running a company with weak areas like that, they become desensitized to the fact that they even have weak areas. Those are the blind spots that nobody's paying attention to. And companies just find workarounds to the weak areas. And then workarounds, and then they find workarounds to the workarounds.
Yeah.
Right?
Been there.
And on you go until eventually the company gets big enough that those workarounds aren't sufficient, right, and the weak areas start to become fail points. So business, it's relatively easy, if you know what to look for, to be able to identify where the root problems are. And very often it's nowhere where they think it is.
Yeah. And so as business owners growing a company, you've got to have the long-term game in mind. What's going to happen to your company in 20 years, 30 years, 40 years when you are ready to transition, right? And it could be selling. It could be transitioning it to the next generation. Like my company, I've got a 200-year vision for my company, Ken. My son is my chief operating officer. We are already in talks of how that transition is going to happen over the next few years, because I want him to have this company, but I would love for him to have the company at 2 to 3 times its value. Not that he's going to pay it to me necessarily, good, but it runs into his coffers, right? And it allows him to expand and grow. Unfortunately, I think a lot of business owners don't think about these things. They get to that point and they realize you don't really have an asset that anybody wants.
That's right.
And so the business closes and they go, I did all that work for nothing?
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Absolutely fair. I mean, if you look at the business marketplace in the US, roughly 6 million businesses, 5.5 million of them are sort of less than 100 million in revenue. So they're in the kind of the small, medium enterprise segment, right? 70% of them are owned by baby boomer generation owners who will have to transition ownership in the next, say, 10 years or so, right? But they're baby boomers. We're aging out. We can't own and run our companies for that much longer. Of the 70% of the companies, which, by the way, that segment, this SME segment, employs about half the workforce in the US. So 50, 60 million employees are relying on these businesses for their livelihoods. 70% of them are baby boomer owned. Roughly about 85 to 90% of those companies are not sellable today. They're not of high enough quality. They're not of high enough value to be able to attract investors or acquirers. There's plenty of capital out there, $3 trillion of equity capital that's sitting on the sidelines idle by private equity firms, venture firms, family offices, high net worth individuals, angel funds, all these different groups, roughly $3 trillion of idle capital, not because they don't want to invest it, but because there aren't enough companies of high enough quality or high enough value in which to invest. The big opportunity for companies, business owners, is to increase the quality and the value of their companies over the next several years and get to the sort of the top of the heap as far as companies that go to market. Ever wonder why people hear about companies that sell at big multiples? It's because those are the few companies that are of high enough quality and value that they're appealing to the investor community. When they go to market, because there are so few of them out there, it's like a feeding frenzy for acquirers and investors. That's why multiples get bid up. in the last, 4 or 5 years, multiples have been a lot higher. That's why, because there aren't enough high quality deals. If the
Right.
business owners can take that and put their own companies into that category, then they too will be able to get those much higher multiples as opposed to not being able to sell at all.
Right. And when you, as a business owner, a lot of us think that our business is going to be a big part of our retirement plan.
Right.
And unfortunately, it might turn into a nightmare unless you do the work that Ken's talking about. And fortunately or not, the business owner is uniquely unqualified to do this work. I mean, you have a skill set, Ken,
Yeah.
that most entrepreneurs don't have. And that's
Sure.
why we need to bring Ken in to have these fresh set of eyes to go, okay, here's what's going on. Now, if you're thinking about retiring in the next 8 years, 5 years, whatever it is, 10 years, here's what we need to start doing today to build the value of business to double, triple what it is today. Now let's talk about retirement, right? Because that changes the entire game. And so how do you work with companies? Is it like a long-term thing, multiple years, or is it a short-term? What kind of ballpark, or does it change by company?
It does change by company, but typically it's a 3 to 5 year process. Sometimes if business owners need to sell or really want to exit their businesses and quicker, then yes, we can capture some of the more low-hanging fruit. But to really maximize the value, it's a 3 to 5 year process, sometimes longer. We have clients that have been in our process. They start off saying we want to sell in 3 or 4 years. And then when they see the transformation of their companies, 3 years in, they change their minds. I'm having fun again. This is really exciting. I think we can get to another level and another level. I don't want to sell yet, right?
Yeah.
And so sometimes now we have clients that are 6 or 7 years into the process and they're still going strong because it never ends. It's just an iteration. You keep updating, refining, recalibrating, and then laying out a new plan for the next few years. And what's really cool is this is all measurable. So we have a process. I created a software platform that's now been in the market for 10 years, but we use it. We license it to advisors all around the US and even outside the US. But it's a process for being able to very efficiently identify where the root problems are in a company, where are the weak points, and then it generates a roadmap, a very detailed roadmap of where the company should be allocating their energy and their resources over 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and so forth, and in what priority in order to balance the company, get the weak areas to be stronger up to where the stronger areas are, and then continue to improve the quality and strengthen the company in unison across all of the major functional categories. And it measures the impact on the value of the business for literally any initiative that they are contemplating undertaking. So they'll know in advance if they do X, Y, and Z, here's the value that we're going to be adding to the company.
Wow. That's amazing. I love the fact that you have software that identifies issues. That's huge. Then you get a roadmap, and then you get a roadmap that actually prioritizes. That's the missing element so many times is, okay, great. What do I need to work on first? And to understand that it is a process. You didn't get here overnight. You're not going to get out of here overnight, but
that's right.
The end game, the destination is going to be a company that is more valuable, worth more, whether you at that time choose to keep it, sell it, transition it. You're going to have greater opportunity to do that with a greater return on your investment, which I think this is really cool because so many times people think ROI is higher revenues, higher profits. And as Ken said, those are byproducts of a well-run company. And Ken, with his eagle eyes, his X-ray vision, his fresh set of eyes to come in and go, okay, here's what we do. So, dude, I love this. This is intriguing. I've got a whole list of questions I should be asking you, but I'm going to save those. So I guess for my audience, if you're running a business and you think you might be thinking about transitioning or selling, I think it behooves you. That's a word I really like once in a while, Ken. It behooves you to reach out to Ken and see, because unfortunately, odds are, the truth is, your business probably is right now is unsaleable for what you think it's worth. And so Ken's the guy who can help you understand how to transition that business over the next few years so it becomes saleable and helps you realize the fruit of your efforts over these last few years. Is that fair, Ken?
That's fair. And I would just add to that, even if they don't want to sell their company, they just want to run the company at peak performance and have it be able to grow more naturally with, right, with less stress, have more balanced work-life balance, have
We don't want
happier
any,
employee, all of those things. So yeah.
we don't want any of that, Ken. Good golly.
Yeah.
So, how do people get a hold of you, man? This is really, really intriguing. How do people get a hold of you to take that next level, to learn more about what you do?
Yeah, our website is corporatevalue.net. The company is Corporate Value Metrics. The website is corporatevalue.net. And there's a lot of information there, contact information, requests for more info. It's all there.
Okay.
Yeah, be happy. I'm always happy to share and talk with anybody who's wants to learn more.
That's terrific, man. Thank you for being here. I'm going to have that in the show notes. We're going to take care of all of that, because if you're a business owner listening to this, you probably need to pause, rewind the silly thing, and just listen to it again, because there's so much that Ken dropped, all those nuggets, to really understand the value of your business probably isn't where you're looking, and you need an outside set of eyes, an expert to come in and help you build the value of your company properly, so it runs better, more efficiently at peak performance, so that you're going to get the value from it down the road. So reach out to Ken. Corporatevalue.net's the website. And Ken, thanks, man. Thanks for what you do for business owners to help them to grow them, and for being my guest today on Expert Speak.
Thanks, Michael. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.